are joining from around the world. I see it's 5:30 a.m. in the West Coast in America, 8:30 a.m. in New York. What else we got? We got London 1:30 p.m., Delhi 7 p.m., Singapore 9:30 p.m., and in Australia, in Brisbane it's 11:34. Sydney midnight. So and in New Zealand it's probably like 2 o'clock in the morning or something about now, I would guess. So indeed 2:30 in the morning. Good to see all of you guys and welcome. So yes, thank you for joining again. I hope you've noticed some of the things that I've been doing with the channel. I've actually got a bunch of updates tonight about the channel, about stuff going on in YouTube, what I'm doing with my ChinTV. There's been some progress, there are some updates to report, which means I'm going to have to be more diligent about that. In terms of like big subjects this week, there aren't so many big subjects to do. There's all the little bits and pieces of news, so I'll try to move through it quickly. But yeah, very quickly, see who's in the comments. We've got Steve from Berkeley in there first. Thank you for joining, especially I know I didn't give a lot of notice about the stream tonight, so indeed thank you for jumping straight on, especially if you're in Berkeley. It's like 5:30 in the morning in Berkeley. I assume you must be in Tokyo or something, right? But good to see you. Oh yes, thank you everybody for remembering to like. I should put, you know what, that's what I should put up the top. That's kind of meaningless, my sub count and the latest sub. I should put on if you like or something like that. But yes, Ramzi Berabia, good to see you, long time no see. I've noticed your Facebook things pop up in my feed a couple of times lately, so I see that you're in Japan, so congratulations on that, and hope you're having a good time and doing okay with all the cold at the moment. Sergeant Bilko, good to see you always. Quint Ranked, awesome to see you. James Kelly, good to see you. Mr. Quidditch, good to see you. Kang Kondos, you did make it indeed. Indeed, if I am ever in Osaka or Kobe, I'll go for a Belgian beer. Actually, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to have any free time. I'll be down there for work, but I am going to have to go down to Osaka in April. So you never know. Channel Ralph, yay, indeed, good to see you. NTN, konbanwa, good to see you. We've got Nicholas Sufandavong, good to see you. Nicholas Sufandavong, that's a name I don't recognize, so welcome to the show if it's your first time commenting, and yeah, glad that you're loving living here, Ramsey. You should unsub and sub to have your name displayed. Hey, whatever gets you going, Mr. Quidditch. That also just made me have a quick thought about my, in terms of what's been going on. Well, maybe the first thing is with my ChinTV. So yeah, the app has been working and it works pretty well. You know, you can go in there, you can to clean up your subs, you can see how active your channels are, unsub to channels that are not active, create lists of similar channels or channels on themes if you want to catch up, and autoplay as you watch, like a TV channel, the different subs. It was interesting following the YouTube news this week, and I'm actually just thinking I should give a my ChinTV update at the start of each channel, which now that I start to do that, I should probably do a clean segment so I can cut this out and post over on my ChinTV. So maybe I will do that. Hey Tokyo 503, good to see you. Well, it's good to have the meet and greet in the beginning. And let me also just try to queue up, because there will be another Japan business time this week, which I need to remember myself what that's on. Dressing for work. Oh, that's quite a good one actually, dress codes. People wonder about that. So yeah, nice to see everybody rolling in. And yeah, but you know, I wonder if that thing's even working, because I know I've had some subs and it's always the same every week. So I think I will, yeah, I should play around with the interface of this after the show tonight. Alright, so a lot to get through tonight, so let's start off with so welcome everybody. My name's Hiko Simon. I am, as well as having Hiko Simon, having my own regular YouTube channel, I also am the guy who invented my ChinTV, which is a website to enable people to basically keep up and watch all the YouTube subs and not get distracted by the algorithm, and to watch the subs the way that, you know, people want to watch the subs, which is we want to watch it like TV. We want to be able to organize by TV channels, different themes, because we don't always subscribe to the same thing. It's really made for power users who have a lot of subscriptions but want to keep up with their content. And so we have a lot of updates happening with the site at the moment, and around that, you know, because of that, I'm keeping up pretty closely with what's happening around YouTube as well. And so around that, I've got some updates, just YouTube related updates that I'm going to go through first, and then I'm going to go into the regular updates for my Hiko Simon sort of news show on Tokyo Tonight. So Yeah, in terms of my ChinTV itself, so the big news this week is that we actually started the work after a bit of a pause. The site is working great at the moment. You can subscribe, unsubscribe, or not subscribe, but you can unsubscribe to channels, you can organize them into bundles, you can autoplay those bundles to watch all your content as easily as you like. But we're going to add some new functionality, basically all the new functions. I've gone and spent a whole bunch of money developing the site, and now I've got to try to maintain the overhead for the site, and I want to add some new features. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a membership system on the site where it's free for everybody, and it's going to stay free for everybody as it is right now, and it works pretty well right now. But what I really want to do is I want to add some more features, starting off with it's kind of funny, sometimes like when I'm washing the dishes or vacuuming, I want to watch long videos, like longer than 10 minutes or whatever, or podcast type content, and it's fun just to listen, like when I'm going around doing something that takes some time. At the same time, when I'm on the train in the morning, I want to catch up on as many vids as possible and feel like I'm catching up with what's going on. So you always hate it when you're going through a bunch of 2-minute videos and you feel like you're making progress getting through your subscriptions, and all of a sudden you hit a 1-hour video or something like that you don't want to watch at that time. So what I'm going to do is I'm developing to add in a duration filter, which means that you can actually, people who subscribe to the site, like make a small contribution, which I'm thinking of making $3 or $5 per month, which will help just maintain the dev overhead that I'm using at the moment for the site. And they'll get the benefit of every new rollout that we do. Ultimately I'd really like to make a dedicated mobile app. That's where I want to go, but for now, I want to make it worthwhile for people who want to sign up to support the site. So we're going to start off with, when you're feeling like catching up with long form content, you can filter, so it will only show an autoplay within the bundles that you make, the longer videos, or if you want to catch up with shorter videos, you can just adjust it by time. And that works with this show as well, because I've got this 1-hour show every weekend, and I try to make long, shorter 10 minutes or less shows generally out of the segments of the show during the week. So there's an awesome new feature which we're developing, and we're actually integrating Stripe functionality, which will enable basically payments which for me to use to basically pay my developers and the overhead for the site, because right now it is actually costing, and it's all coming out of my pocket and there's nothing coming out of it. There's 2 ways I want to enable to pay, however, and that's the other thing that's really interesting right now. The first is, of course, having subscriptions built in for people who like the site and aren't particularly interested in me or this channel or whatever. I want to make it so that people can subscribe, and if you subscribe, you'll automatically basically get an account which will get the rollout introduction pro features, as well as every new pro feature in future, i.e. all the free users are going to pretty much get the site as is, but all of the pro users, you're going to get the benefit of all the updates that we add to the site. And there's plenty that I want to add on, plus you're going to get dibs on what the new features are. Ultimately, I'd love to get like an Apple TV app or an iOS and Android app or whatever, stuff like that. But I need help because I'm paying developers to help me make it. And it's a really fun project, and I want to make YouTube the ideal way to watch it for people who care about subscriptions. So if you're interested in that, that's one way, is being able to subscribe. The other thing, some people have mentioned that they said, why don't you just get a Patreon, because we just want to support all the things that you do, and maybe you'll move to another project after this and do other things. I thought that was cool, and I was looking at Patreon, and I was looking at the idea, well, if I had a Patreon and I could identify who the users are who are on a certain tier, I could make that a perk. I could actually manually add them and give them the pro features on my ChinTV as a perk. But then YouTube went and rolled out memberships, which is basically exactly what Patreon is, except it's baked into YouTube. And I was looking at that, and it's sort of like memberships are like a fix. They're like 490 yen in Japan, $5 in America, and it's of course YouTube takes a cut the same way that Patreon does. But it's basically people can, just like Patreon, become paid members of a channel, and the idea that YouTube encourages is just like on Patreon, you make special updates or special vids. But from my view, that seems like a pretty good way, in a way that I can track actually specific YouTube channels for going whitelisting. I'm thinking I could do memberships as well and allow members of the channel to go and to get the benefits of my ChinTV as well. And again, this would go on and allow me to do other things that I want to do, like I want to make an Alexa app. There's all sorts of ways in terms of how to get like an ideal YouTube player that's not out there right now that I think are really cool, as well as other projects that I'd love to do. So just for the idea that for that I went and checked the criteria, the eligibility criteria, and there's two. I'm trying to remember which is which. you need 30,000 subscribers to open a merch store, which I'm on 33. Every time that they keep cleaning up all of the dead channels, most of my channels are like 10 years old, and every time the number goes down whenever YouTube cleans them up, but I'm still above 30,000 for now, and based on that, you can, yeah, I qualify. And they didn't have this rolled out last time I checked, but I checked tonight, and the merch store for a start is available. So I enabled that, and that's another thing I'm going to get to in a moment. But the other thing is memberships is also working for me. So I figured, what the hell, well, you know, seems easier than setting up Patreon and figuring out how to manually connect it to my ChinTV. So I'm going to set up the memberships on for the Hiko Simon channel, and I'm going to figure it out. Let me just get it all together at the moment. For now, you're certainly going to get specialized updates on the projects that I'm doing, music projects, web development projects, app projects, stuff like that. I will give updates like this available on that, but more than that, you guys who join that will get all the feature of all the stuff which I'm working on, which is just super cool and super fun. And I'm making it because I want to use it myself, and I want it to be useful for you guys, and you guys are the main people who have been supporting me to date on this stuff. So it's a way to do that. Which brings me back. The other thing is the merch store. You need 10,000 subscribers or more to do that, and it wasn't available in Japan when I looked 2 or 3 months ago, but I looked tonight and it was available. The merch store was 30,000, the memberships was 10,000, something like that. But I went and, so I hooked up the merch store. It connects to Teespring, which isn't my favorite one of those services, but it's integrated with YouTube. And I went and applied, and it takes an authorization, and it got authorized. So I've just gone in and configured already a bunch of t-shirts and sort of swag in there. Now, again, I'm not going to do that to make money, just to be clear. I put in the minimum price that I can see I can get away with. The cost price of the t-shirts is like $10, $20, and I tried to do that to make it zero profit. And it said, no, you have to put in more profit. And I played with it a few times, and for some reason you got to put like $1 on every time. But in the end of the day, I just want it to be. So what I've already done is I've got the digital data for the Tokyo Digital Crew shirts that I have that you've seen, as well as the Tokyo Tonight t-shirts, as well as the My ChinTV t-shirts. So, you know, mugs and t-shirts and a couple of hoodies and whatever. The idea is, for that, I'm not going to make money off that. I don't want to make money off that, but to the extent that you guys think that was cool, I thought that's another fun thing that I noticed when I was setting up YouTube tonight. So I'm setting up a merch store. It's all going to be as cheap as possible. It's pretty much just going to be the cost of the thing to Teespring, so they'll get their money. Yeah, it'll be kind of fun if you're into that, and you can order it. Won't be any hassle for me. When I got these My ChinTV shirts made, I went and personally ordered them. I had them all in this room. I actually took them to the post office. I mailed them one by one. I handwrote the addresses. You know, it was a big pain. It was great to do, but yes, well, these are American sizes, Shizen-taisu, so I'm sure you're going to be okay. Yes, I'm surprised at being authorized. I mean, you know, I'm quite happy with how things are going along, but still, it's nice that I qualify for these things when I think they're clearly aimed for people who are much more active and popular on YouTube than me, but I'm glad if I get the benefit. Do they come in Taco Bell size? Asks Mr. Quidditch. Well, like I say, they come in American sizes, so I noticed there were like some 4XLs, I think, on some of the shirts, which was, I didn't realize that was a thing, but apparently it is. I don't know if that's a Taco Bell size. That's like the police taco that they use in Japan. So anyway, so swag. There's going to be swag available integrated into the YouTube app, the mobile app, and the online app. Which, if you guys want to get cool stuff, and again, especially stuff like the Tokyo Digital Crew stuff, I love that logo, and I haven't been very good at being active on that lately. But at the same time, that's just stuff that's just easy to make that way, right? It's just an easy way to get a cheap T-shirt or a hoodie that's got that on it. I'm not trying to make money off that. I am trying to make money off the memberships, and the purpose of that is to fund the development projects that I'm doing, which are to give to you guys. So, but that's how I'm going about that. So you'll see a few updates on the channel around that. And in that vein, I'm going to continue these sorts of YouTube news updates, since it's actually kind of interesting, including one that I noticed on the Creator. Lately, YouTube's been doing this YouTube channel called Creator Insider, where they actually have staff from YouTube coming out and casually in a vlog-like format like this, talking about the actual stuff that they're working on in the background of YouTube. And I really appreciate it, actually. I think it's really good that I've known people at YouTube, and I've been telling them for years that, you know, rather than tell us how we should make our videos, you guys should have a go at making videos yourself, and you'll probably be surprised that you'll understand it a little bit better. They did mention as a side comment at the end of the last video that I saw anyway, I think there's been one or two other posted, but a video this week, that they're actually going to introduce autoplay onto subscriptions for some users as a test. Which is like, oh damn, that's like My ChinTV, except of course they're not bringing back collections, which they did run for a few years and got rid of, and I still hope that this is more niche than that. And in any case, I'm going to make it, I think it is already set up in a way that's worthwhile. But again, it's good for me. It's important for me to keep up with YouTube news, just so I know if I have to pack up the whole thing at some point. So yeah, so in terms of what was cool around YouTube news, in addition to, of course, the fact that, so my ChinTV, there is a test version apparently going up that I still haven't seen yet, but which will have this duration feature working, where you'll be able to filter the playlist on my ChinTV by duration of the videos in it, so you can watch all short videos and catch up on lots of videos, or long videos and enjoy, like if you're on a drive or something like that, which I think is super cool. I'm stoked about that. So look out for that soon, as well as subscriptions are going to get rolled out pretty soon, so look out for some updates probably next week with that. In terms of what's going on in the YouTube community, Lifehacker had this kind of very cool, it's a voice recognition teleprompter where you basically understand where you put the mobile phone. Basically it'll reflect on a screen, so you can see the teleprompter, but it'll be in front of the camera, and basically because the camera's focusing beyond the teleprompt, it's really cool. You look straight at the camera and be able to read. Not that I'm ever prepared enough to have anything to write down before a show, but I thought it was a good feature. But on top of that, that's a standard teleprompter. The other cool thing that lets you do is it actually recognizes what you're saying and matches it to the script, and it moves the script, so you don't have to keep manually adjusting the teleprompter that you're on while you're talking, which I thought that was called Teleprompt Me. It's a really cool sounding app, and it's cool to hear that these sort of applications are out there. La Migra is after me. I have to be careful. Anyway, that was pretty cool. A few videos this week on Creator Insider, interviews with creators who have burned out on YouTube. Of course, creator burnout has been around since YouTube has been around. You know, we all go through it to certain extents. The main thing is people get so excited and energized when they have a successful YouTube video that, yeah, they start to get really sucked up and more soaked up in trying to keep up with the comments, and, you know, trying to keep up with the subscribers, and feeling like they need to keep making better and better content, and they crash. And as you can see, I try to keep it as light and easy as possible. I am posting lots of videos lately, but I found out a really easy way to do it, out of slicing it out of the show. But there are some creators who have experienced that, and they're sharing tips, although honestly they didn't really have many suggestions other than just stop. YouTube's considering putting in messages not just aimed at people who watch YouTube too much, but people who make YouTube too much, saying, hey, you need a break. So yeah, this is also TubeBuddy, which is like a plugin which I'm looking at. I'm using the free version right now, but I'm tempted to pay for the pro version, just because again it's kind of doing a little bit what my ChinTV does in terms of adding features to YouTube, but more from a creator perspective than a watcher perspective. But they've got a cool thing, like they've got an Alexa integration that you can check your subscriber count, which in my case most days is going down, so I don't want to really use that. But again, I do like the idea of doing an Alexa integration with my ChinTV, and what they're doing is really, really awesome. If you're running a YouTube channel, you should totally look at that. So yeah, Tibby's has burnt out from her PhD and decided to do YouTube full time. Well, that's possibly bad news. It's actually Phil. He was doing a medical degree, and he kind of did the same thing. He went full time on YouTube, and his content is amazing. I mean, I still really love to follow it. So I guess it can be a good thing, but it's literally the 1%. It is a really small fraction of creators that really ever make it into making a living out of it. Although that said, there's another story in here that I've got somewhere. So this was cool. Apparently now the number of YouTubers earning between the number of channels with 1 million subscribers doubled last year, and also the number of channels earning more than $10,000 per year grew 40% based on just AdSense, not on other endorsements. So there are more and more people actually making a living off YouTube. Not that I would really want to do that. For me, this is fun, and that would make it a job. I see people like PDR and really big channels that really do seriously like do this as a profession thing, but it's really hard work. I wouldn't want to work that hard. I know these kids who want to be YouTubers, they want to be YouTubers because they think it's easy. It's not easy, and the people who do that and don't burn out, they deserve some respect for that. This is another thing. So in the mobile app, you can see in the middle there, YouTube is going to roll out features to promote smaller channels. They're basically going to have browsing and explore to basically help people find content which will not be conspiracy content in future, including small channels. So it's pretty cool that they're starting to think in that direction. Yeah, the YouTube president put out a video putting out the YouTubes for the priorities for YouTube this year. So just generally strategically, it sounds like they are going to double down on getting I think premium content, as well as they seem to have turned back towards certainly supporting features for creators, which I like. And this is the other one which I wanted to talk about, which was super funny in a way. So again, ever since YouTube ever came out, the whole thing about how, you know, if you got a bunch of dislikes on a video and how it could kill you on the algorithm, and it was sort of a trolling thing that people would like make lots of accounts and all try to dislike it as much as possible, and people would freak out about it. And again, especially for a small channel, having, you know, dislike bombs, I mean, even having like 10 dislikes, you know, and some people do this. I mean, I know people have had like trolls go through their whole channel and do this, and this has been a thing forever. And you know, I guess it's cheap thrills for trolls. For some creators, I've had some people say, like, how could someone do this? Like, they're you know, I'm trying to build up a channel, and they've just gone and kind of vandalized the whole thing. And in the end of the day, it's just something that we'll just sort of live with. It's just, you know, and it kind of is what it is. It's been a problem, if you can call it a problem, from the beginning. And the thing is, dislikes are important. I'm not against dislikes, and if I say something that offends somebody, or that generally, like, someone feels like they were misled into coming on here or something like that, and they really feel like this should be disliked, you know, that's your freedom. And in the end of the day, that's how we know when a video is like misleading, for example, or whatever. It's because we know from the dislike count that, oh, there's something wrong with this video. If there's, you know, 1,000 dislikes as well as and 500 likes, and it says that, you know, going to show the rarest animal in the world, you know, it's probably not going to show the rarest animal in the world. So it's an important feature, and we all sort of live with it. But of course, what's happened recently is YouTube's pretty much announced that they are now brainstorming ways to combat these dislike mobs. After all these years, why are they caring about this now? Could it be because the YouTube Rewind video was the most disliked video in history, and now all of a sudden for YouTube, this thing which was never a priority for them is now a priority? In the end of the day, I mean, if they're going to look at it, if they're going to look at a way of doing, you know, making this something which at least it can't be used in a trolly sort of a way, like people who aren't even watching the video, who are just like, you know, going in at the same time watching it for 1 second and disliking, sure. I don't think they should actually make it too difficult to dislike. I mean, it's kind of part of the deal. But it is funny how this became a big agenda item for YouTube after that happened. So yes, those are updates about YouTube and about my ChinTV. It's actually quite long, but look out, because there are going to be weekly updates going forward, and I'm going to make this a segment of the weekly show here that I'm going to give updates just on what's going on YouTube, and particularly what's going on my ChinTV. So I hope that you enjoy that. They've started to eat their own dog food. Well, and about time they probably should. So, Mr. Quidditch, well, in the end of the day, I mean, for me, I watched it, and yeah, in the old days, the Rewind videos were cool because it was showing what we still considered to be regular people. You know, big YouTubers were still considered in a weird way to be like regular internet people. I'd like to think I'm a regular person, but, you know, people, obviously. Yeah, the idea was it was kind of the new mass media, and it was a way to celebrate the fact that YouTube had a community of regular people who weren't like these stars. And again, I feel bad in a way that I think just the fact it was introed by Will Smith. Will Smith seems like a perfectly nice guy. It's just, it kind of showed when it was kind of celebrated. It was almost like YouTube celebrating the fact that they're now popular with real celebrities, and they don't need small celebrities anymore. That's kind of what it felt like. I was just watching it. It was kind of like, as a celebrity thing, it was kind of cheesy, and as a non-celebrity thing, it was kind of like, oh well, I guess they're not really interested in the community anymore. And pretty much it's just something to dislike for everybody, and it was kind of cheesy. You know, it wasn't well done. On top of that, cheesy kind of works if it's like if it's sort of real small creators or whatever. But yeah, I'm sure they're gonna pile the algorithms and trying to learn what happened with that and not do it again. So yeah, and exactly, Steve from Berkeley, haters gonna hate. Hate indeed. Well, that's just what some people do. I mean, you know, what can you do? So yeah, into the topics for tonight, which are, rather than the My ChinTV topics, oh, okay, so I've got that on here as well, but we can take that off because I just covered that. So heads up, every Wednesday we've got 9 episodes. We just had episode 3 of 9 episodes for Japan Business Time with Rochelle Kopp. The episode the other night was on getting stood up. Literally, it was a bit of a weird story about a terrible story, but I've heard this many times. When you're the foreigner and you show up to the office, it's actually not unusual like this case. It sounds like it was a bit weird, but it's not unusual in Japan. Please, this is a dangerous piece of information to share, and you should watch the video to get this right. to date in the office, and it's not unusual at all to be asked out for dinner or invited out by co-workers, which is a little bit surprising to me. I mean, in New Zealand, everybody already knows each other to begin with, but let alone you add on top of that the fact that you work in the same place, and it's like everything is too close. So I had a lot of caution about this sort of thing, but of course you come to Japan, you have a beautiful person saying, hey, rock star, take me out to dinner. And this is something that quite often happens. The story in this case was somebody that Rochelle knows that actually apparently got stood up after being asked out to dinner, and the conclusion that her and her friend took from the story was, oh, maybe Japanese sometimes say these things, but they don't mean actually going out to dinner. To me, that was weird. It was actually getting stood up. But yes, the whole idea of office dating and about do people really mean it when they say, hey, let's do lunch? That was a good episode. The next episode this week on Wednesday at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time is going to be dressing for work, Japanese dress codes and whatnot. So actually pretty interesting subject, and actually is in this day and age as well. I work at a place that has no dress code, which is unique in Japan, although I've worked in probably places with among the strictest dress codes in Japan as well, and really everything in between. When you do IT, it can be pretty flexible. So yeah, it'll be a good episode, so check that out. And again, setting up a new playlist, and you can watch that and all the previous Japan Business Times. Keep an eye on, keep supporting the series. Hope you enjoy that. Also, if you haven't, I know some people here, I think she's in Taisu, and I myself have actually participated in Rochelle's own, I think it's a full day seminar, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. and March 14 she's doing working effectively with Japanese, and she does the reverse as well, working effectively with Gaikokujins, with us, for Japanese people, and it's basically just covering the sort of challenges and ways to overcome the sort of cultural awkwardness that can happen, particularly in situations like mergers, but also in just situations where you're the only gaijin in the village, which I've been many times. And what I loved about her seminar was it wasn't a patronizing, oh, this is, in Japan they use chopsticks, and it wasn't like that at all. It was actually a lot of people like me, and the fun part about it was everybody sort of swapping notes. There was a guy who was doing Japanese HR, there was a woman who was doing like engineering, there was just really cool backgrounds and stories, and swapping notes. And it's really worthwhile, and if you're interested in this, yeah, it is a corporate rate, but yeah, reach out, and I'd encourage anyone able to grab a place if they're still available. They come around a few times a year anyway, but there's one coming up in March, so there you go. That was pretty cool. You never knew about Nirvash before that. Yeah, Nirvash is a big deal in Japan. She's in Taisu, but yeah, I guess it depends on the job that you're doing, how much you actually have to go through it. It's kind of unspoken, but it is this idea that nobody wants to have their neck on the line for being the person who made the decision without consulting. That's what Nirvash is about, going around and making sure everyone signs off. Mr. Quidditch, you have these workshops. You have to work with people. They have some group stuff, but generally speaking, it's sort of group discussions. Yes, they're highly interactive, Mr. Quidditch, but that's the idea. Yes, isn't talking with people, because that's exactly what the intention is. These are almost like HR trainings, but they're with a really specific Japanese and Western culture, and where these things crash and fail. So yeah, exactly. It's like a round table discussion. It's a lot of fun, and I do encourage it if you ever get the chance. But yes, it's hugely worthwhile. Some interesting news coming from New Zealand, where we also have a thing on indigenous rights, and I've been myself to Akanko in Hokkaido, which has a big Ainu community and culture village and stuff like that. It's a little bit put on now, of course, because of the forced assimilation of Ainu people in normal Japanese society at the end of the 19th century. But that said, yeah, they're pretty much ignored. They're ethnically and historically distinct from the Yamato Japanese, from the Japanese that we identify as Japanese. Yet Japanese are very big on the line that Japan is a pure homogenous country, where apart from the fact that of course you have Naomi Osakas and people like my lad and so on challenging the paradigms of that Japanese are all a unitary ethnicity. Setting all that aside, you have also people from Okinawa, people in Hokkaido, the Ainu people, who have always been in Japan and always been separate, ethnically or distinct from the culture, languages, traditions, and history of the Japanese. Not to say that there isn't a lot of obviously intermarriage and overlapping, and that they're not all exactly the same in terms of equal citizens of Japan and Japanese people. But yes, there's actually a bill before Parliament at the moment, not passed yet, but there's a bill before Parliament actually looking to recognise for the first time The Ainu is indigenous people of Japan, effectively predating the Yamato people. So yeah, there's already kind of support for the idea. Again, it was part of the sort of subjugation of Hokkaido and the conquering of Hokkaido, which happened all the way up until the 19th century. There were still parts of Hokkaido that were like basically like indigenous parts of America that weren't under the control of the central government, and it was part of that subjugation that as they were subjugated, they were maybe unlike America, rather than being forced into reserves, although they were kind of in reserves at least until they were conquered. They were basically given full rights as Japanese citizens and proclaimed not to exist anymore, which is obviously good and bad in some ways. But yeah, it's good that there is now a willingness to consider recognizing and celebrating. And Suga-san himself, apparently in August, he visited Hokkaido. He said, having the world understand these splendid aspects of Ainu culture will contribute to the international goodwill and lead to promotion of tourism. Amen. I mean, in my country, we celebrate Maori culture, and again, we went through over a century and maybe nearly a century and a half of trying to suppress Maori culture. It used to be illegal to speak Maori on the phone in New Zealand. You know, it got to a point where there were very few people who could speak the language anymore, a bit like Welsh in the UK as well. And it was right around that point, everyone's like, well, why are we being such dicks? And suddenly realizing that this is actually something with some cultural value that's unique to this country, and, you know, what are we doing? Whether we're killing it? And everyone kind of flipped it around. In New Zealand, there's been a huge cultural revival of Maori culture, particularly from the 1970s. Around the same time in the UK, and it's kind of similar to that in Japan, and it's something that will maybe even later in Japan, and truly Ainu's just about disappeared as a culture and a language. But it's good to see that the government, I mean, it's incredible to me, maybe coming from a country that has gone through the same steps, that it's taken so long to recognize this, and why they wouldn't. But this is a really, really positive thing. And if you ever come to Japan, I really would encourage, not just for the fact that Hokkaido and Okinawa are wonderful, wonderful places just to go, and they are, you know, so different in so many ways. The food is great, the people are great, the culture is great. But yeah, if you ever get to Hokkaido, don't just go to like Niseko, don't go to the Australian Bondi beach of skiing in Niseko. Go to the like northeast of Hokkaido, and check out some Ainu villages, and you'll see it's a lot like Native American and a lot like Polynesian culture actually, and you can sort of get the sense that, oh yeah, probably, you know, 5,000 years ago, these people, I mean, we know from the Lapita pottery culture that basically the people, the Polynesians, the Hawaiians, the Samoans, the Tongans, the Maoris came from Taiwan. We've been able to trace it back to there, and so it's pretty plausible to think that 5,000 or 6,000 years ago there were proto-Polynesian sort of people there. And again, when you look at a lot of Native Americans and a lot of Ainu people, it's pretty easy to see and identify. You can see in the culture, it seems pretty plausible to me that they probably like just spanned out from the western part of the Pacific eastwards. And you can see a lot of parallels. It's super cool. The food is delicious up there, by the way, as well. Lots of deer, lots of game sort of food, as well as seafood. So yes, definitely got to get up there. And Mr. Quidditch, you'll go to the Kuril Islands. Well, most of the Kuril Islands, totally Russian, nothing wrong with that, that's okay. And Ainu live on those. It's the southern Kuril Islands, it's those bottom four, which have caused all the fuss, but there we go. Indeed, Quint Ranked, there are commonalities. There are actual common words, believe it or not, between Maori and Japanese, and also the vowels and the pronunciation of Maori is the same as Japanese. It's a very vocally simple language. So it's always kind of funny. In New Zealand, it's taken a while, but when I was in Auckland, it was always... some Maori people would point out that one thing they appreciated about Japanese was that Japanese naturally and intuitively pronounced Maori place names and names better than Caucasian New Zealanders do. You know how white, you know, not necessarily just white, just English speakers everywhere have this way of just mangling vowels. We'll see an O and we feel like we have to like say O, and, you know, we have to like add 10 different sort of, you know, shifting vowels and not just say O. But, you know, Japanese, Spanish, Maori, they work on the same way, R-E-U-A-O, and, you know, they just say it like it's there, which we don't actually do. So, yeah, it's super interesting. I love this stuff, and it's really cool that they're going to recognize Ainu. That said, I was planning this part of the show to be about 2 minutes in, and we are 37 minutes in, so I'm going to have to speed it up, but there we go. This is just a really cool photo, so, hey, credit to China. They put robots on the far side of the moon. They're flying around, and look at this photo. That is a photo of the far side of the moon that we can never see, and that is the Earth in the same shot on the far side in full blue picture frame. I mean, that's just an awesome picture. So I just thought that was cool. Record number of foreign workers. So as the number of Japanese workers continues to decline and decline and decline, the number of workers in Japan, not residents, this is people working and paying taxes, which would include me, is now 1.46 million people, which is a 14% increase from the previous year, which, I mean, compared to the birth rate, which is declining like, 0 point something percent every year. This is pretty important. The number of foreign workers in Japan, indeed, 2008, so that's the halfway point of my time in Japan. I got here in early 1999. You can see there were 500,000, and now there are nearly 3 times that at 1.5 million. So you can see there's probably, and this is great, breakdown by the nationality, and this is also really shifting. It's funny that Korea isn't included here. I guess Korea are broken out because they are the Koreans that are born in Japan have the special permanent residency status, and they're tracked separately to normal immigrants. Although of course there are also Korean immigrants, but obviously they make up a smaller group. There we go, beside Indonesia there on the side. So actually, like, Koreans are there. I think Chinese have just overtaken the number of Korean residents, but they wouldn't be treated as foreign workers. People on work visas, they're here on special permanent residency visas. So on work visas, PRC first, obviously. Then you've got Vietnam, which is incredible because 10 years ago there were no Vietnamese in Japan, and they've just exploded in the number of people. Philippines, there've always been a lot, but again they're the next largest group. Brazil, Nepal, South Korea, Indonesia, and Peru, and then you finally get to all 7 of the G7 countries: Canada, Britain, Italy, France, UK, America, plus Alpha, which I guess includes Russia. I don't know why you would include Russia, but there you go. Oh, and Australia and New Zealand being included in G7, so I guess I'm in that G7 wedge over there just before other. But just for another idea, whenever we say gaijins and we think of foreigners, here working in Japan, we are very much an insignificant, afterthought on what's really there. I mean, it's almost 50% Chinese and Vietnamese, but there we go. And by industry, again, realizing that manufacturing, service industry, wholesale, accommodation, food, drink. So yeah, for me it's really cool just to see that we talked about, I know we're here, foreigners are here. Japan is not in parts of Tokyo, dare I say it, are actually cosmopolitan. Mr. Quidditch makes an excellent point, actually, that Dick, it's a simple word. The thing about New Zealand is that we only have 2 vowels. Basically they're both variations of the fish jumped over the fence. It's basically just 1 or 2 vowels. We have like E and pretty much. But yes. So anyway, coming back into it, but that's pretty cool actually, seeing the number of foreigners coming in, which reminds me, the spending by foreigners coming in as tourists, not as workers. Australians are the #1 spenders. So of course Chinese were making a big deal that they were coming in and they'd like collect up money from the whole village and buy rice cookers for everybody and carry them all back at the airports. And that seems to have settled down now, to partly because of the Chinese government cracking down on the practice, and it was pretty disruptive when it came to Japan. And now going to regular tourism, just spending on skiing, hotels, rail passes and so on, it turns out that the highest average spend is by, so this is total spending I think, but I think if it's per capita spending, there we go, spending per person. On average, Australians spend over $2,000 US. Spanish people, close second, Italy. China is still doing pretty well actually, and when you consider the different costs of living in China, they're obviously spending more of their income when they come to Japan. But there we go, Britain, United States was down the list. Koreans are way down the list. Taiwanese, it's kind of funny, I would have expected the Taiwanese generally are more affluent than mainland Chinese and that they would spend more, but I guess, yeah, maybe Chinese spend up for the occasion. Hong Kong. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it, those rates showing how much people are spending when they come to Japan. And that Australians are there at the top, on the top bracket, which I guess implies that they're doing a lot of things. Like I get a lot of Australians go to Niseko, they travel around a lot, they spend a lot on accommodation. In fact, is there data on that? No, there isn't. But yeah, wow. And the government targets here are crazy, but they have achieved them. So there you go. So that's cool. Another story that we have this week, I think I mentioned it last week, and I'm going to still do a standalone show on this. from last week's show is the issue of these government statistics on average wages, and this idea that all companies with more than 500 employees have to be surveyed on what they're paying as wages, to be able to keep data on average wages being paid in medium and large companies in Japan. And the Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare decided, well, that's far too many companies and far too much hard work to do tracking all of those statistics. So what we're going to do is we're only going to contact the top 500 companies, the very biggest ones, take their average wages, and we'll take that as good enough, even though that contravenes the laws on how we're supposed to actually collect collect data on wages. And as a result, because the largest companies generally on average have much higher wages than the smaller companies that are in that bracket, for the last 15 years they've totally misreported. They've gathered incorrect data on wages, which is showing Abenomics has been enriching and people's wages have been staying the same or going up, when in fact when you apply the correct methodology to the total sample over the total amount of time, we've just discovered now that they're doing the correct analysis, oh crap, wages have been going down this whole time and Abenomics hasn't been working. And what's worse, that because the official data from last year was based on these inflated high wage statistics, and the ones this year are correct, it actually portrays that average wages in Japan have collapsed in the last year, at least in regular sort of white collar type jobs. So the government's not looking good from that. And they're pointing out that, and this is happening at the same time as the government's been trying to cause an inflationary cycle by raising prices, which companies are raising prices but they're not increasing salaries, which means that the average cost of the true wages, adjusted for cost of living, have, now they recognize, have actually been going down when they've been denying this for the last 10 years. Besides the fact also that this miscollection of wages has also contributed to people being underpaid unemployment benefits, all sorts of other dramas. So the government's really getting a caning over this at the moment, and a deserved one. And it implies that their economic policy, which the whole world's been reporting on Abenomics and so on, the fundamentals about whether it was working or not appear to have been totally based on mistakes, which isn't good, and it's not good for Japan's reputation, as I said last week, because again Japanese like to think that, you know, they're not perfect, but at least they don't just make stuff up like everyone assumes maybe PRC does. Or maybe they're not quite making it up, but they're certainly cutting some corners, and unfortunately this is something that we see over and over again and from the Japanese government, so that's disappointing. Sergeant Pilko has a question, but just before it cycles out of the screen, I see it at the top there. Did the Chinese find out that the moon is flat too? I believe that's exactly what they did. As you can see from that photo, the moon is perfectly flat. Interesting fact there, interesting fact. Just overexposed the Earth, so what? We know what it looks like. I see, are we still talking about the moon? Let's go back to the moon photo. I see it's causing some controversy there. That's a pretty flat looking photo, isn't it? But not only did they discover that the moon is flat, they also confirmed pretty much, I mean, the Earth looks pretty flat to me in that photo as well, so there you go. Round around the edges, but you know, of course we all knew that. What else have we got here? We've got, speaking of being a foreigner, if you're here spending money, like the Australians do, spending the highest amount of anyone coming to Japan, please do not spend it on political donations to politicians, because those said politicians will be forced to pay the money back in the best case, and in the worst case, apologize and resign. It's a bit of a silly law, but of course this does happen in every country, that you can't accept political donations from citizens of foreign countries or foreign countries themselves. And yet, of course, you know, the Saudis... the Chinese, you know, people like to figure out ways to sort of pay people that will say things that they want said in countries that they want to influence. Japan being no exception. The leader of the opposition, someone's been caught, and half the time it seems to be the people who made the donations themselves come out and say, haha, I paid you $50 and I'm a Korean citizen and a lawyer. Not sure how that works. Again, Korean citizen, this is where it's particularly tricky, because I mentioned before how Koreans are generally not treated the same as regular, like, foreign workers, because they're often born here and they're here as regular citizens. So they're special permanent residents, and they often have Japanese names, which means that, you know, chances are, I mean, just by the numbers, most companies I've worked in have permanent resident, born in Japan, special permanent resident Koreans. And it's really common now, given that they're 4 or 5 generations into living in Japan, that a lot of them are not even trying to maintain their Korean citizenship anymore. It's not true that they cannot access Japanese citizenship. It was true until about the 1980s, but they changed the rules so that now Korean citizens, pretty much if they want to, can apply. It's a hassle. Some resent the fact that they have to apply when they've been in Japan 4 or 5 generations, but some generally don't want to change. They want to assert their Korean identity. They don't want to upset their parents and their relatives in Korea, but for whatever reason, Even those who don't change their citizenship often live in Japan, and they're allowed to live in Japan on assumed Japanese names. Like they keep 2 sets of names, ostensibly to avoid discrimination that can happen from having a foreign name. So because of all of this, and because these people are basically, you cannot really tell, they don't look different, they don't act different, they're raised, educated in Japan, they often have Japanese names, and in this case a lawyer, so they can have a foreign nationality and still be, for all intents and purposes, perfectly regular seeming Japanese people, even, you know, upstanding lawyers and whatnot in society. So yes, this person made a donation, and for whatever reason it came out, and this is the sort of thing which can trigger a scandal, which can force someone to resign, and the leader of one of the opposition parties is now in a bit of a pickle over it. But she said, for now they're saying, paid the money back, no big deal, which I think is actually the correct way to treat this, because otherwise, you know, I could torpedo anyone I dislike, and we're coming to that in a minute as well. But yes, this is actually kind of common in Japan. It's been coming lately. Yeah, I realize I hesitated as the words escaped my mouth. Again, I realize I have a view of being a lawyer that's maybe different to you guys, but in Japan, lawyers get respect. It's a nice place to be, at least as long as you're not like a dirtbag lawyer. Which, yeah, there are many. It's a pretty good bunch over here. That, yes, it's you know, they keep the numbers really small. They don't let many become them here, so that's part of it. Now, for all of you people that were making fun of Ariana Grande getting a tattoo on the inside of her hand in kanji, that was a mistake, that was a barbecue grill. Shame on you all, shame on you. How could you do such a thing? Now she's given up studying Japanese. I'm going to be honest, when I read this story, I felt bad. I mean, she's pretty young. The idea of tattooing, like, anything at all, let alone like foreign words, let alone like on the inside of your hand. I mean, I used to write shopping lists on biro on the outside of my hand, which used to alarm people, but the idea of getting a tattoo, I must admit, I was kind of like, oh geez, what a silly thing to do. But and she was getting Japanese lessons, she was genuinely into the culture, and this is all actually a really good thing. And just all the trolls have been too much, and now she's walking away from it all, which is kind of a shame. But I guess the lesson is just don't tattoo barbecue on your hand unless you really mean it. Just use a biro, you know, just write barbecue, seriously. But yes, that's a shame. Yes, for those who have been following the Gon scandal, he remains in jail and exceedingly pissed off with Nissan, but at the same time now investigations into possibly misspent monies by Gon have been happening from Renault in France, and France is increasingly willing to, basically Renault as well, they're giving up and holding on to the idea that he will return. And yeah, it turns out now they've discovered that he went and got the palace, the Versailles Palace, for his wedding, and that was underwritten by a company that was owned by Renault, which looks like there's going to be like $60,000 misplaced. He's in jail, and apparently he's issued a statement saying, "I'll pay back the money." But again, just you know, probably if you lift up enough rocks, you're going to find stuff like this about him, and it looks pretty much like everyone is resigned to the idea of treating his case as like France and Renault. They really did put some pressure on the Japanese government over this. There's a lot of press pressure, but in the end of the day, I think the Japanese government's strategy of just waiting it out, and in the end of the day having you know, Renault and the French government needing to move on as well. Essentially, the Japanese strategy is working. It's putting him in a worse and worse position, and this is kind of what's starting to come out now. And they're looking for ways to basically move on as well. Again, who would want that job? They're still advertising. If anyone is watching who wants to become the next international chairman of Nissan, Renault is still looking for a replacement. Nissan has also said they don't want another damn gaijin. So if you want to apply to be that Renault nominee, certainly, as I understand, the position is open, and go for it. You never know. So yes, we had, yeah, that sounded pretty bad, Kang and Kondos. Don't. I realise you're from Australia, but understand that what sounds kind of normal in Australia doesn't sound normal anywhere else. So yes, photographs of a snowy Tokyo. The this is coming back. We had snow yesterday in Tokyo. It didn't really settle very much, but it was our first proper snow of the year. I took some slow motion video and whatnot, and yeah, it was kind of cool, and somebody took some nice photos at night. The thing about Tokyo, if you really want to take awesome photos of Tokyo, get it on a rainy night. Snow is cool as well, just because it's sort of unique even for us. But in fact, actually, some of these, I must admit, are pretty cool, and it only really snows like this like once or twice a year, if that, in Tokyo. So I must admit, these are some good shots. But if you want to get really, really cool shots that are really easy to get anytime, come during the rainy season, because like when you're going at night in Tokyo and everything is wet and everything's reflecting all the neon light, it looks really Blade Runner. It looks awesome. So yes, indeed. And the best thing about it, Sergeant Bilko, is that you don't have to shovel. It melts the next day normally. It's pretty rare you'll get snow that'll last. Every few years we'll get a snow that'll last for a few days, but yeah, pretty much. But in any case, it was nice to have some snow, so that's pretty cool. Marie Kondo, I want to talk about, man, now I've got to the first story that I was planning to talk about this week. Now, I've got a confession at the front of this that I'm familiar with Marie Kondo. She was actually, in spite of what some people are trying to say, that she wasn't famous in Japan and she's kind of becoming famous on the outside coming in. Yes and no. She kind of was known in Japan. She wrote some books about, being organized, and kind of went off to America and became very successful in America just as she was starting to pick up here. So she was a known quantity, and people sort of know the theory, the kira kira, does this make you feel warm and fuzzy or sparkly or whatever they say? Does this bring you joy? That expression for getting rid of junk. So she was already sort of known in Japan, and she's gone and obviously has exploded. Now it's becoming this sort of, guru, and everyone's sort of talking, and apparently now we're getting all this sort of back and forth now. She doesn't even speak English. Why am I watching this thing with subtitles, which I must imagine must be incredibly distressing to a lot of close-minded people. But yeah, she's got something worthwhile to say. It doesn't always have to be in English. But what I'm finding fascinating from all the different discussions that are happening around this and tracing how did this happen, and personally, for my take from what I've seen of her, and I've not seen a whole one of the episodes on this Netflix series yet, I must admit, I see, as a Japanese, she's got an unusual demeanor and an unusual way of speaking, and to tell you the truth, it's not very appealing to me, and I do enjoy tossing junk out, which I always did as a kid whenever we moved house. My dad was in the army, we'd do it all the time, and I'd throw everything away, and I have no problem throwing anything away, actually. But yes, the idea of having someone come in to organize your life, I find kind of disturbing. I mean, as a disorganized person. So I don't know, I get a little bit, I find her a little bit freaky, to tell you the truth, and not in a good way. But apparently a lot of people do think she's freaky in a good way, and now there are these surrogate Marie Kondo people who are like surrogates, who will come and actually do the service of coming and will help you get rid of all of your stuff. And I've already seen some pretty good parody videos of this as well. And I find it kind of fascinating how she's just developed this kind of cult of people who are like using this methodology, who like, compulsively want to tidy up everything, not just they start with their own stuff and then everything's tidied up, and so they want to go out and become these kind of decluttering advisors for other people. And power to them. The world needs more declutterers, certainly, and the idea that they can go out and help people become that, I think it's a great thing. It led to a theory that I had during this week, which is this basically. I've had this theory, which I've shared before on this show, about waves of, when I say expats, I'm English-speaking expat residents of Japan. So basically people from that G7 plus alpha thing on that wedge, which is a really insignificant and you should not be associated with the term gaijin at all, because we've never been a meaningful minority in Japan. But that said, people who speak English like me who come to Japan, there's kind of been these identifiable generations of waves, and what I find hilarious and funny is not only can you identify really broad trends and with a million contradictions, and probably if you look at this in any scientific detail, it's probably false, but I can find enough cases based on meeting people from different waves of coming to Japan to back this up, that it holds some sort of at least barstool, half-drunk, unscientific weight. And it is this, that there are identifiable different waves of, like, popular waves of booms that have brought different types of foreigners to Japan since World War II. And what is funny is, not only can you identify these waves, but you can also identify the fact that every wave basically is, by definition, by the interest in that thing which brings them to Japan, are completely hostile to the people that come before and after in every single case. So here's my theory, and I think this ties in really well to the idea of Marie Kondo surrogates eventually coming to Japan as like gurus coming here to declutter everything. My theory is, as it's written up here, is basically that the first wave in the 1950s and 40s during GHQ were Christian missionaries coming to save the souls of godless Japanese people. So there were a lot of I've met people who've set up schools here. A lot of the international schools were set up by Catholic missionaries, and so on in the 1950s. I've met these people who used to run these schools who came at that time. So the first wave of Christian missionaries. Then in the 60s, you had the sort of spiritualists, the people who were coming for Eastern religion. And Japan, there was a lot of interest in Zen Buddhism at that time, and people who came out for meditation and Zen Buddhism and so on. So obviously the Christian missionaries would obviously have been hostile to them, as the Zen gurus probably would have been not that interested in traditional old-fashioned religion from the Christian missionaries. These were followed by martial artists in the 70s. There was a huge martial arts boom. The Bruce Lee fans, the people. So basically, you had the hippies coming in the 70s to come and discover Eastern religion and meditate. You have these other guys coming to break wooden boards and do Aikido and imitate Bruce Lee and so on. The martial artists in the 1970s. Then in the 1980s, at least the martial artists were, having like stoic lives. The Eastern, religion people were like, hippies and kind of meditating and whatnot. But in the 80s, you had the bubble, and these people discovered that, you could come to Japan, teach eikaiwa 3 days a week, get $5,000 a month, have endless, sex and booze and going out skiing in helicopters and just having this amazing life. And these people basically were completely, hedonists, along with the whole period of being in Japan where everyone was like that. And that was followed in the 1990s by people who came pretty much just chasing Japanese women. That was the wave. So Victor came during the money wave, during the bubble. And Victor talks about how the people in the wave after that, particularly the New Zealanders and the Australians who all spoke Japanese and were willing to come to Japan and work pretty much for free. We destroyed the English teaching business. And we all stayed here because we all got girlfriends, and we were quite happy to stay. I came to Japan engaged to a Japanese person who I did not marry. But then I became single. It was even better, of course. I wasn't going anywhere. And meanwhile, we're destroying the lives of the people who came in the bubble, who came here for money, and we took that away. So we took away their purpose for existing. And for the people who came for women, the only thing that really mattered was just basically not doing anything that would ever put off women. That was we didn't care about money, we didn't care about spirituality, we didn't care about Christianity, we didn't care about, martial arts. Some people did. But the one thing that we cared about was just not doing anything that would be uncool to women. So of course, naturally, the next wave was the anime fans who would come over and wear these manga shirts, which, I used to have manga shirts, and when I got my first Japanese girlfriend, they would say, literally, my first Japanese girlfriend in New Zealand, threw out my manga shirts without asking me. And she was just saying, I don't want to be dating someone who would wear those shirts, because in the 90s especially, the otaku thing was associated a bit with the Akihabara cults. Like like geeks were kind of scary back then. There were a few weird like murder incidents. There was the Shinrikyo, stuff like that. Anime has gone mainstream, both for Japanese and for foreigners, but again, completely incomprehensible to the people who didn't even want money. They just wanted to be cool with women, and the one thing that you could do, the kryptonite to being cool with women, anime is what the next generation. A waifu and a couple of and an anime DVD connection. So again, completely hostile. These are people who come to Japan with a genuine hobby, or I imagine must have complete contempt for the people who came with no interest in money or hobbies or anything. Why are we even here? They have the anime phase, and so all that these people do is basically build up these amazing collections of just stuff and hoard them in apartments and live on their own. So you can see how in this narrative, having Marie Kondo, devotees coming as the next wave, coming and basically meeting anime people and making them throw away all their collections would just be like the perfect next wave. It would just it would just fit the narrative perfectly of this idea of completely juxtapose generations following one after the other. So I am all in with these Marie Kondos who will come into your home and make you throw away all your manga and anime. Because that would fit perfectly with my drunk incoherent theory about waves of expats coming to Japan. So there you go. So that was kind of funny. Brexit. I'm sorry, Britain. I'm sorry, British people, but it is morbidly, it's like watching a car race with lots of crashes. It's kind of just morbidly interesting from the outside. I can't understand how you guys are doing so badly, but of course I find it hilarious that the X-Trail which again, because they were going to make the diesel version there, and right now Europe's had this huge thing where it turns out all the diesel cars, mainly the German ones, you know, the Mercedes-Benzes, the Volkswagens, were all cheating, or actually we thought were like super emissions efficient, and actually they've been poisoning, and they've caused Europe's emissions to all be wrong for the last 20 years. So because of this backlash and diesel cars are not selling anymore, is the reason this hand's saying, and nothing to do with Brexit, that they've decided to not proceed with the production of their diesel X-Trail SUVs in Sunderland, which unfortunately means that thousands of planned jobs there are not going to go forward. They're going to manufacture the cars all in Japan instead, which I guess if you want to send them to UK and you're outside to the EU and you are outside of the EU, it doesn't really make any difference if there's no deal between Britain and the EU, putting them in making them in Japan or UK. So I do think they really should consider renaming it the Brex Trail. Just a suggestion. It's got X right there. I mean, how can they? It's the Brex Trail. Seriously, it kind of makes sense, right? I'm sure they'd actually sell them in Europe if they called it that. And again, we're like 1 month away, and from a no-deal Brexit, and Toyota's saying there's a 6-week lead time on parts and so on. And if they're going to get held up at the border, they're going to have to stop production in the UK. So again, I know that there's a lot of politics and fighting about getting a deal there, but Britain doesn't have any choice. They really don't. I can't understand how they would do this in such an unprepared world. But yeah, sorry, Raz, and believe me, I'm not. As much as I can, as I've said, in the absence of thought, I can say, well, you know, Britain kicked New Zealand out, now Britain's kicking itself out, which is a bit strange. But I kind of, it's a bit like Fight Club, I suppose. But no, this is really bad stuff, and I hope that they sort it out. But while talking about cars, this is really cool. Toyota's just announced a leasing scheme for Lexus cars, where you'll be able to, I mean, the new Lexuses are beautiful cars, and yeah, they're going to start allowing basically owning cars by subscription, i.e. you're not going to lease a car, you're not going to get a car and lease that car and keep it in your garage like rent to own or something like that. There'll be subscriptions where you'll pay a subscription to have availability to a class of car, and Toyota's just going to keep all the cars and it's going to look after them for you and let you use any one of them that's available. And I really think the part that's missing here is when they can store these cars and you don't have to look after car parking, because in Tokyo car parking is a really big hassle. But when you say I want my car, press a button and it comes. I think that the subscription model for owning cars is going to be explosive. I think this is how it's going to be. This is how I'm going to. I can't see myself buying a car here because the car parking is too much of a hassle. But Toyota's actually, I think, taking a step into the future with this. There was a Lexus dealership sort of in the neighborhood that I'm in. I'd love to drive one of them, but yes, even as rental cars, they're expensive. But yeah, on a subscription thing, I mean, if I was earning, I mean, that's a lot of money, but if I was earning a bit more, yeah, I would probably sorry, Crave, and commiserations, Crave, honestly, but yeah, seriously, like, you guys need a deal in place for that. This is really exciting to me, but what I'm looking forward to most is when the cars are able to drive themselves back to storage and not have to worry about that and be able to get any car that you want. So yeah, what can you do? It's always nice to find out, by the way, that there's people in the comments that are watching that I don't recognize right away. So good to have you there in the comments, Craig, and good to see you, Jace Mackey, as well. So yes, well, at least there's a buffer for having everything suddenly stop at the borders in France in a month, which it could still happen. Two more stories. This one, I really don't like to talk about crime news generally. It's not my thing, and I don't like to go into it. This is a particularly horrible story that I will not go into the details of, but it's essentially a child abuse case that happened in Noda City that my first job in Japan was working in this place. It's a really bleak town in northern Chiba. It's about an hour and a half north of Tokyo. It's where the Kikuman factory is, and a silicone wafer factory that I used to work at. There's nothing there. There's no tree. There's trees. There's no hills. It's basically rice fields and just cheap housing and a couple of factories. And in this setting, there was just a case of a girl who was getting physically beaten by her father, like apparently on a regular basis. And in school surveys on child abuse, she actually wrote feedback specifically, "Please help me. You know, I'm worried my dad's going to kill me." Yada yada. And the school actually showed the feedback to the dad. And when they tried to put her into protective custody, you know, they actually, and the father produced a consent letter. The school teachers said that they were so afraid of the father that they that they gave the information on where she was and allowed her to be handed back, because they were intimidated by him. So basically the system completely failed for this girl and she was killed. And it's a horrible, horrible story. What is interesting about this is that now there are multiple cases coming up in the news this week. So this has been really big news, and I think it's probably gone around all of the schools in Japan, that, you know, this sort of thing, please speak up if this is happening at home. You know, everyone, it's such a shocking story, and it's so shocking in the way that the people that kids would rely upon, the teachers. Japan has almost no family and protective services, but to the extent they had them, everything broke down and failed here under the pressure of just a horrible person, the father in this case. But what's happened is that obviously teachers all over the country and kids watching the news have seen, you know, if this is happening, call the police. This is a crime. They can't beat you up. And what has happened this week is there's been a case of two cases. A case in Hiroshima where a mother slapped her basically for being lazy. She open hand slapped the face of her daughter, and her daughter went and called the equivalent of 911, 110 in Japan, and the mother was arrested. And some people, the internet comments on that story were, well, you know, now the police are going to arrest a parent for open hand slapping their kid. Like, you know, is this, aren't we overreacting? And some people saying, well, you know, I mean, maybe that's the right thing and good on the kid. You know, the kid calling, so something above, the person saying, now what kind of age are we living in that kids are calling the police on their parents for discipline? But some people saying down the bottom, you know, no, the kid did the right thing calling 110. I mean, better they do that than end up another news story like this other kid. And amen to that. Another story came out a few days later of a middle school, second year middle school, so probably about 14 years old, where apparently the father repeatedly punched, not open hand, repeatedly punched this boy who wasn't doing his homework, and that boy called the police, and that person got arrested. And again, the internet comments said, yeah, you know what, the kid did the right thing. And yeah, this is the age that we live in. Some disagreed with it, but some people are starting to point out, yeah, if he got punched like dozens of times, that's too much. And, you know, respect to the kids that are obviously getting the message that they can't rely on adults to bail them out. You know, they're calling the police. This actually reminds me, when I was in New Zealand, I had a Japanese teacher who was in his 80s, and he had a son who was in my class, and my son, when he was in second year of middle school, equivalent for New Zealand, which is in high school over there, he actually did call the police on his dad for beating him, and his dad had to go to court one day while he was being our teacher. So this stuff happens, and, you know, if this is something which changes the culture, I think it's a great thing. Although it's terrible that these things are coming out. In Japan, we've just had statistics come out saying that Japan was the most reported cases of child abuse ever, which one, it highlights an epidemic, of course, within the society, but at the same time, it also shows perhaps there's a willingness to report this that probably wasn't there before, which is the first thing you've got to do to correct it. So it'll be interesting if this actually, the story is terrible, and I'm not sharing all the details of it here, but it's a terrible story, but it's so shocking. It's actually, I would say this is a positive change, and hopefully parents should be afraid, right? I mean, you don't punch your kids, so it's just stupid. Final story of the week. We're over again. These have been too long lately, but here we go. Yeah, so everyone's favorite deputy prime minister, former prime minister, and finance minister was talking to a group of elderly in his home constituency in Kyushu, where basically everyone is elderly now. I mean, he's a representative from a part of the country which has the elderly, you know, lots of elderly and not enough kids, in a way more dramatic than in places like Tokyo. So he was giving a talk to his supporters, his elderly, you know, 80 and above sort of supporters in his home constituency, and he said, you know, they're saying that you have to feel bad, you know, that we're funding, that we have this crisis, that we can't fund pensions, and that we're having this demographic issue because there are too many elderly. It's not your fault for being elderly. The problem lies with the ones that didn't give birth. The thing about Taro Aso, I've said this before, I don't dislike him. When he was voted out, I mean, he had a disastrous term as Prime Minister, but when he became like an opposition party member with no power whatsoever, he went on TV, and when he was commenting on his time as Prime Minister, he was really self-effacing about what a disaster it was, and he'd make jokes about himself and how stupid he was, and you know, how these things, and oh yeah, I knew I'd really done it then when I said that. I was wondering, geez, what should I do? He was recounting episodes like this, and he does this sort of thing all the time. But the funny thing about it, he's actually quite smart. He's actually quite humorous. He obviously doesn't have a filter, but he was kind of making a point that, you know, the problem is that we don't have enough kids, and we're blaming elderly for the fact that we don't have enough kids. But essentially, the way that he phrased it, he said specifically, it's the ones that didn't give birth that are the problem. He's basically telling an elderly, mostly male audience, it's young women that are to blame for all the things that you're being blamed for. Like, we shouldn't cut your pensions just because some young women didn't want to have kids, is what he said. And essentially blaming women. And again, I would argue that when a finance minister is blaming women who don't consider it economically viable to be able to, you know, to marry and to go and have kids, and he's blaming them for the fact that there aren't enough kids. It's kind of the minister. It's like the Minister of Health blaming, you know, not providing enough vaccinations, and then complaining to all the people with measles for getting measles. I mean, it's the minister. If anyone's going to provide an economic environment that makes it feasible to have families, you know, to have kids, it's the Minister of Finance. But he's basically blaming the woman who can't afford to have kids for not. You know, he's the Minister of Finance, so he's walked it back, as of course he had to do, and it's highlighted again perhaps just how out of touch the government is. All of that said, we still have the Brewster's Millions. We have the opposition that seems to be trying as hard as it possibly can to not take advantage of the government trying to blow up itself. It's like both parties. It's like the opposition and the government are like in a competition to try to see who can lose the election, and the opposition is doing a better job of it. So he's going to get away with this, but yeah, that is all the stories that we have this week. Not having children, problematic. Aso by name and by nature. That's all the stories this week. We are 15 minutes over, and I apologize for that. We have a lot of updates. Check out for more stuff with my ChinTV. Remember, if you like the show, I really do appreciate if you like it. It helps. I am trying to get some energy back into the show, to the channel, with some new subscriptions. You'll see that what I'm doing is I'm taking this show and I'm basically cutting it into short videos for people to discover the content later on, and you know, during the week. So people, obviously, if you want to watch the full stream, I appreciate it. I love having you guys there in the comments, and I love exchanging with stuff, and when we have more time, taking your questions more. But at the same time, I do like to make the content discoverable, and so I chop it up into smaller videos, and if you want to catch up, that's a great way to do that. Love if you guys can share the content and so on. If you think there's any story that's particularly interesting, always remember you can tweet at me during the week and tell me what topics you would like me to share during the week. But if you like, please like. Look out for Japan Business Time this Wednesday. It's going to be another great episode on dress codes in Japan, and look out for updates. And I'd really appreciate look out. There's going to be some swag. There's going to be memberships, which is going to be more for getting the next step of my ChinTV and getting some cool sort of projects going, which I really want to share with you guys. And thank you always. Great to have you along, and see you next week. Boom. Peace. Said, but then I've got to figure out how to stop the stream, and I'm not on the right screen, so I've got to come over here, and it's, oh, that's right, I've got to go into Streamlabs. Here we go. So the most underrated podcast on the internet. Thank you, Steve from Berkeley. It's extremely underrated. That's actually a feature of the show. I didn't even include the story where they left New Zealand off the map at IKEA. Although honestly, that's not even, that's pretty much normal. But anyway, see you later. Peace.